Have you ever seen someone sitting in a position, holding a title, wearing the right clothes, and yet you look at them, and something in you knows that place isn't theirs? Not because they didn't try hard enough, not because they did anything wrong. Just something isn't there, something that should be. That something is hard to name. It isn't credentials, it isn't seniority, it isn't performance. It's a kind of weight, a weight that only comes from having actually carried something in that position. 3,000 years ago, Homer used a bow to explain this. Over 100 men, one by one, tried to draw it. Not one of them did. Then an old beggar in rags walked over and drew it. That bow wasn't testing strength. It was testing whether you had the weight of that place inside you. Penelope waited 20 years for Odysseus. The suitors occupied her palace every day, eating her food, drinking her wine, pressuring her to admit Odysseus was dead, to choose someone new. She stalled as long as she could. She once said, "Wait until I finish weaving this cloth." By day she wove, by night she unraveled it. 3 years. Then a servant betrayed her, and that couldn't work anymore. By that point, Odysseus had already returned to Ithaca, already sitting as a beggar in the corner of his own palace. Penelope made a decision. She announced, "I will hold a contest. Odysseus left behind a bow. Whoever can draw this bow and shoot through 12 axe rings, I will marry him." That bow was Odysseus's bow. He received it as a young man from a friend. He treasured it. When he left for Troy, he didn't take it with him. It stayed behind, waiting. The suitors stepped forward, one by one. The strongest ones tried, the most powerful tried, the most confident tried. Not one of them could draw it. The bow was too stiff, or, more precisely, the bow didn't know them. Then the beggar in the corner spoke. "Let me try." The suitors laughed. "A beggar trying Odysseus's bow?" Telemachus said, "The bow is mine. I decide." The beggar walked over. He picked it up. Homer says, like a musician who knows his instrument, he gently plucked the string. The string sang. Then he drew it, one arrow, through all 12 rings. The palace went silent. Why could only he draw it? The suitors were not weak people. They were nobles from across Greece, princes, the most powerful men from every region. Why could only Odysseus draw that bow? The surface answer is skill or strength. But I think Homer was saying something deeper. That bow was Odysseus's bow. When he first held it, he was young. He trained with it, got to know it, spent time with it. Then he was gone for 20 years. The bow stayed there, waited. When he picked it up again, as Homer says, like a musician reuniting with his instrument, he plucked the string. That wasn't strength. That was a relationship between an owner and the thing that belongs to him that no one else can replicate. The suitors could sit in his palace, drink his wine, try to marry his wife, but they couldn't pretend to be him. Some things can't be claimed just by sitting in the seat. They require that you've actually carried what that seat demands. And that weight shows. Today we love to talk about credentials, titles, positions. These things are real. They represent something. But there's one thing they can't give you. The actual weight of that place. Have you ever watched someone step into a role, sitting in that seat, saying the right things, doing the right things, but the people in the room listen to them differently than they listened to the person before? Not because they did something wrong, but because they haven't carried the things that seat requires yet, the decisions that have to be made, the losses that come with it. That weight can't be measured in years. Some people sit in a place for 20 years and never touch that weight. Some people have it in 2, because it doesn't accumulate through time. It accumulates through what you did in the hardest moments, what you chose to carry. Odysseus was gone for 20 years. In those 20 years, he lost every single member of his crew. In the Cyclops' cave, survived in darkness using only his mind. In the underworld, faced his dead mother. Between Scylla and Charybdis, made a choice with no good answer. All of that stayed in him. When he walked into that palace, even in rags, even with no one recognizing him, all of it was still there. The bow knew him. Authority sometimes looks like control. You control the resources, you control the space, you control others' behavior. But that kind of control is fragile because it depends on external conditions. Conditions change, that control disappears. Real authority is something else. It doesn't need daily confirmation. It doesn't need you to keep reminding people. It's just in you. All those suitors in that palace for all those years, not one of them could draw that bow, because the bow didn't recognize who was sitting in the seat. It recognized whether that person had the weight. Psychology has a concept for this: earned authority, not what you're given, but what accumulates through real tests, through proving again and again that you can carry it. That kind of authority cannot be imitated, because its source is what you've carried, and no one can carry that for you. Have you ever felt you technically had the credentials, technically had the position, but felt like you weren't ready yet? That feeling isn't always right, but it's pointing at something worth sitting with, the weight of that place. Are you ready to carry it? Not a question about your ability, a question about whether you've let yourself experience what only that position will teach you. Or, the other direction, have you looked at someone sitting in a place and felt clearly the weight just isn't in them? Now you know a little more about what that weight actually is. The suitors occupied that palace for years. They believed if they stayed long enough, pressured hard enough, that place would become theirs. But the bow never belonged to them. Not because they weren't strong enough, but because they never carried what needed to be carried. Odysseus walked into that palace as a beggar, no title, no glory, nothing visible to mark who he was. But the bow knew him. That recognition wasn't magic. It was war, drift, loss, and still choosing to keep walking home, all of it left in him. Those things can't be taken away. Even if you stripped him of his palace, his title, his property, everything visible, those things would still be there. So I want to ask you what you're doing right now, what you're carrying, what you've survived. What will those things leave in you? I'm not asking about your achievements. I'm asking, is the weight there? Because the world is never quite what you think it is. Wu Talks World. Until next time.